Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my deep honor tonight to present our Patriot Award to Colonel Brian Menace. Like the Minutemen who won our nation's freedom, every member of today's armed forces is a volunteer. They put down their civilian lives and they take up arms in defense of our freedom. That's why we chose the Minuteman statue at Concord, Massachusetts as our logo. We created the Patriot Award to recognize an American who inspires the members of our armed forces to serve our country and, if necessary, to give their lives for our freedom. Brian commands the 4,500 men of the 4th Brigade Combat Team, 82nd Airborne Division, U.S. Army. He recently led them on a challenging 9-month deployment where they operated in some of the most dangerous and remote portions of Afghanistan. They accomplished a great deal, and Brian will tell you about that later tonight. But they also made tremendous sacrifices. In fact, just last week, Brian hosted a ceremony to honor their fallen and the wounded troops who also came home, some of them with life-changing injuries. This was Brian's 8th combat deployment. He spent approximately 5 years, all told, in combat since 9/11. Think about that, 5 years. That's longer than the entire duration of World War II. He participated in the initial invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, and he made multiple return deployments to both countries. He served our nation faithfully in uniform for over 24 years and spent the vast majority of his time with elite special operations and airborne units. Brian is a true warrior. But Brian is also a uniquely caring and dedicated officer who truly loves his troops and their families, and he's a servant leader. In fact, one of our board members, Paul Murphy, happened to be chatting with one of his work colleagues, a woman whose son is a trooper in the 82nd Airborne Division. And she mentioned how she had met her son's commander, and she came away from that meeting feeling like the commander really cared about her son and that he was going to do everything he could to bring him home safely after they went to combat. And as it turns out, that commander was Brian Menace. Brian, it's a deep honor to present you our Patriot Award tonight. You're a true inspiration to everyone that you touch, and we thank you for your friendship and your wonderful example in our lives. Please join us on stage. Brian, please accept our Patriot Award as a symbol of our gratitude for your leadership and service to our nation and our people. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Okay. Yeah, right back here.
Thank you. Well, please, really, I'm humbled. You know, following Jack Jacobs, though, I mean, it's almost as difficult as I recognize the challenge we might have, and surely you all understand I'm not David Patriots, a wicked smart mentor of mine who I have a high regard for. But this sort of is my first opportunity to be understudy, I guess. It was about 7 years ago. I had just been promoted to lieutenant colonel and got an invite from another classmate, a guy named Tim Isako, to speak at the Chapel Hill Academy dinner. It's an alumni dinner we have, and I was so humbled to have an opportunity to speak to folks. Ran down there, got to Chapel Hill, drove from West Point to take part in this, and I got there, and the signs had said, "Hey, welcome to the dinner with guest speaker Coach Krzyzewski." And so I asked him what happened. He goes, "Hey, Brian, we had Coach K speaking, but he canceled about a week ago." And, we figured you'd be a good stand-in. So, and really, I had a beautiful night with some great people, and, was flattered to speak behind Coach K. And simply, it's an honor, to stand here and take recognition really on behalf of our brigade, the men and women of that great team. It's sort of humbling and really sort of, I guess, surreal because frankly, I'm happy to announce I have the best job in America. You just heard, and I didn't know that story from Dave. I'm humbled and I'm very grateful to hear it from one of my parents. But to receive this recognition on top of really doing something I should pay to do is awesome. There's many people I'd like to recognize. To start, I'd really like to recognize you and people like you, the parents that Dave described remarkably, who entrust their most precious possession to me, to do our bidding wherever they send us. And, it's true patriots like that are the real heroes of this conflict over 12 years. We still have family members, parents and wives sending me young men to defend this nation, which is an incredible testament to how much we have matured since the late 70s, as you recall, or early 70s, where we were angry at the Army, we were angry and we didn't know how to focus it. And so I'm very proud to thank you, because to have those American treasures come to me and be entrusted with that responsibility is awe-inspiring, really. Next, of course, I'd like to thank the troopers of our brigade, many who have deployed for longer than I have. A great representation of that is Major Dan Kearney, who's here, a great family friend who has been in and around service. His father was an exceptional leader, one of my mentors. And Dan, like me, has already been involved in this war since the time he entered as a volunteer after the conflict started. As Dave said, and I'm going to try to, as I talk to everybody around the room, it's very difficult to put in context what we're doing there and how it all works together, particularly as you sit with a group like this who are supporting what we do. Our brigade was stood up in 2006 as the 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment. We were stood back up because the Army was in crisis in 2006. We rapidly were growing, and we surged to Iraq and then to Afghanistan. This brigade is deployed 3 times in that period, the most deployed brigade, and suffered the loss of 75 of our American heroes. Amputees in the 3 dozen area, men and women who's had their lives permanently changed. And I want to give you a little bit of context to that. I mean, many people know what the Taliban movement was, and it started where I was operating during this last deployment. And it was started because men with weapons were taking advantage of them after the people we supported went back to Kandahar and took control. The Mujahideen warriors had put in place a lifestyle, and I've talked to many of these people, men mostly, since then. Sarah Chase, a National Public reporter, did an excellent piece called Punishment of Virtue. It's a great book if you want to learn about that area. And Punishment of Virtue captures what she describes as anybody with any virtue in Afghanistan was punished. And it's very difficult to find men that are more patriotic than self-serving. And that was started there. Mullah Omar, right there with a bunch of mullahs that came forward from Pakistan in the early 90s, had a movement that took place in Zari, where I was located with my troops. And he wanted to take back his country. It was government for the people, by the people. And until you study that, it's very difficult to go forward to counter that, because they have an exceptional cause and they're targeting the exact right people, these poor people that have been abused for 30-plus years. I think they have PTSD, frankly. I do. I mean, it's very difficult. They react very as if they have PTSD. And if you've lived in a combat zone for 25-plus years, you might be the same. And so you go exactly the way the people with guns tell you to go. And that's the story of Afghanistan, at least since the late 70s when the Soviets got involved and tried to put communist rule in that area. Zari is an exceptionally complex terrain. It's characterized by ancient mud buildings and grape rows that are made of mud that are terrifically difficult to deal with and exceptionally awesome if you're a guerrilla fighter and live amongst those people. And the Soviets never ventured into Zari where we were because of the difficulty they had, and each time they tried, they got repulsed. It's also very tactically symbolic. That area that we served in is the heart of the tactical area for Kandahar. And we hadn't been able to secure. When I say secure, is sort of bring forward something that would make a difference. For the last 3 years, we've been fighting in that area. 2 brigades before me, and I was there in 2009 with the Rangers, trying to help some folks there. You couldn't walk out of the places where we lived and slept without getting a full-up gunfight, like you see in TV or your kids play with on their video games. And so the NATO's main effort was to secure Zari, and they sent RBCT to go there. Before we went, we knew we had to be terrifically well-trained at our tactical skills, because how important it would be to protect the guys. But we also realized that we had to outthink people. And this was a little bit nuanced. So we took on a huge education. I called it Fury University. We're the Fury Brigade, where I tried to educate young people on where Afghanistan was and why it was important. And it had terrific response from my paratroopers and made a huge gain in the people that we worked with. And just very briefly, while we were there, underwent 20 kinetic engagements a day. That's 20 firefights a day with my people for the first 6 months until we got this thing under control. Faced 1,600 IED events. 1,600 IED events. A lot of them we found, thankfully. We had the highest find rate in country by far. But when you measure 1,600, that's where you get 23 men that have had their lives changed. But the leaders of that unit, as good as they were, we still lost 16 paratroopers and 10 soldiers for commands that were attached to me. And last week I was graced, I had the honor of having the families join us, all 16 families, eager to come back, even though they've had their ceremonies, they've had their funerals, to meet the paratroopers, the friends, the colleagues that their loved one fought with and served with. Incredibly cathartic for us, for me personally, and for those parents. And I was grateful that they would accept my invitation. We helped get them there and spend time with their families. But certainly, as we carry some incredible guilt for, not being able to satisfy, getting them home, it was awesome. And I was really in awe, really captured by the grace of the families and their willingness to, share with us. Again, back to those parents who sent those people to me, who could come back and thank me for my service. In my memorial remarks, I said that, please. In my memorial remarks, I said the following words, and this is how I opened. I feel how weak and fruitless must be any word of mine which should attempt to beguile you from the grief of a loss so overwhelming. But I cannot refrain from tendering you the consolation that may be found in the thanks of a republic they died to save. I pray that our Heavenly Father may assuage the anguish of your bereavement and leave you only with the cherished memory of the loved and lost, and the solemn pride that must be yours to have laid so costly a sacrifice upon the altar of freedom. I wish those words were mine. But that passage was taken from a letter written during the Civil War from Abraham Lincoln to Mrs. Bixby, who had lost 5 men, 5 of her loved ones, her sons, in combat. Those words written by Lincoln, describe sacrifice consistent with what our Gold Star mothers and fathers have done for us to secure our freedom. But today it's so indirect when we talk about the sacrifice made on the altar of freedom. It's difficult for our families, our troopers, I'm sure, to equate our national freedom for the sacrifice that we endured in Afghanistan, truly. And on September 11th, as Dave pointed out, I helped plan the initial invasion with JSOC, and we got after it, and it was easy. But about 6 years into it, we realized that the Taliban wasn't going away, and the regional chaos that supported terrorist operations could only be eliminated if we eliminated the instability in that area. So last year in Afghanistan, as we were deciding this task of defeating this enemy, the most insidious enemy collectively in Afghanistan, the theater's most important area, the birthplace of the Taliban, we got after securing her prized city. The Afghan families in that community, as I already talked about, had been without peace for years. Without going into great detail, this organization filled with these gifted paratroopers that I think were touched a little bit by what we were going to try and do meaningfully, accomplish the impossible. They defeated that Taliban in their homeland, and we rooted them out with virtually no collateral damage. So we hurt. And in so doing, very pragmatically, in so doing, we won over the trust of untrusting people and maybe even forlorn people. Our commanders were so moved by what we saw, we named our operation, not death from above or fist strike thump. We named our operation Righteous Endeavor. Righteous Endeavor. And ladies and gentlemen, in the 12 years I've been involved in the war, I saw no more patriotic or meaningful display of our national values for what our troopers did while they were involved in Afghanistan. They fought for people that could not fight for themselves, and as indirect as it may seem, they helped secure the blessings of liberty we enjoy. Our troopers fought gallantly to protect those who they didn't fully understand, next to people they didn't fully understand. Matter of fact, as we moved into the homeland of the Taliban, I saw we had plenty of Afghan forces, we had plenty of men with weapons, we just weren't working together. And so we stepped forward to create what we called the Unified Command Team, Zari and Maywan. And in that team, we created a synergy that had not been seen before, and I think a model for the rest of the country. Together, we had improved through leadership, good old-fashioned Jim Collins, organizational design and leadership. Coach Krzyzewski would be proud of my men. He would be. Leading police who 4 months before were a factor of instability, abusing their power because they were young people with guns who were undisciplined. My people motivated the local mullahs to come speak to people with guns to help them be righteous. So by applying those tenets of leadership, we created a synergy that had remarkable results and really, I think, have hope for moving this forward. In fact, I get calls, it scares my wife, frankly. I get calls from my Afghan buddies who I served with. It sort of freaks her out. Izzatullah, calls the house. She's like, "You've given Izzatullah your number?" I said, "I have." And so I'm quite convinced he doesn't have reach to 6 DuPont Plaza. But I'm grateful that he calls and gives me updates about what's happening in my community. For I was entrusted really the great responsibility not only to care for my troopers, but the 4,000 A&A I was partnered with, the 3 associated battalions that were working for me, and all the people that lived in those towns were my people. And that's the way we felt about it. Of course, that came as a huge loss, and really, out of respect for everyone, each one of those losses, you're a commander, it just kicks you right in the gut. Certainly need to challenge who you are, what you're doing. Is righteous endeavor the right thing? Are we doing what the fathers and mothers of America would want us to do? And it tested our resolve because we had lost a friend, and parents had lost a brother, or mother had lost a son or a daughter, and our paratroopers had lost a buddy. But I was deeply encouraged that each time my NCOs came back after studying it and renewed our dedication to this righteous endeavor. And each time, we came back and just continued to get after it, caring for our people and caring for the people that we were sent to protect. I main hope that we will achieve what I think is truly a uniquely American and humble goals. So, I ask each of you with all this to be, uplifted, despite our national challenges of which way to go, and I certainly appreciate that. People ask me all the time what I think of the war. I certainly have an opinion, but I love that we can talk about it, and there's activities like this and people like you that will continue to support our paratroopers and our soldiers who continue to fight for us. And it really gives me, I was touched by the Kims had shared with me a quote they found from Pericles, and you might have seen it on the foundation's literature. It says, happiness is the fruit of freedom, and freedom is a priceless gift of valor. And for the first time during those 5 deployments to Afghanistan and in communities late in July and August, I saw Afghans smiling. I know it might seem insignificant, but enjoying themselves around me and my paratroopers, and more significantly around their men with guns. And so I ask you, as I said, to be uplifted by the indomitable spirit that each of our fallen warriors has displayed, pursuing this righteous endeavor and other righteous endeavors that are going on. And remember their selfless commitment. And lastly, I really need to thank you. As although, as I said, I was unable to live up to the trust bestowed upon me by my parents, of my Gold Star families, to bring their loved ones home. I'm grateful to have people like you and people like us who will help me meet my obligation to take care of these heroes' children after the insurance money's run out, after wives have remarried and husbands have moved on, that the legacy of what their husband has done as he laid his sacrifice on this altar of freedom, there'll be something there. So you may be the ones who really uphold my honor. And at the end of the day, show the nation, show our families that the nation appreciates that sacrifice. So again, I'm grateful to be here. I'm clearly not deserving of the accolades presented. I have the greatest job in America, and I have the honor to speak to those family members of my lost and tell them that your son, each time, was doing something honorable, and him and his buddies are continuing to do what they were doing together. So again, thank you for everything. I know we're going to get on with something more uplifting and humorous when Jack gets back up here. But again, I just wanted to put a little context to what I think this means in this current conflict as you continue to try and help the families of our folks who need it. So thank you very much.